Insights from the world's best medical minds. You are watching therightdoctors.com.
Good evening, everybody. I am Professor Anil Arora. I am Chairman, Institute of Gastroenterology, Liver and Pancreatobiliary Sciences at Sir Gangaram Hospital in New Delhi. I am privileged to be presenting to you the concepts of how bad the fatty liver disease is. Being a World NASH Day today, I think it is extremely important for us to realize the importance of fat in the body as well as its damaging effect on the various aspects of the body. In fact, recently we have seen ravaging effects of the perfidious virus called COVID-19. And I'm sure most of us are still searing from the bad effects of this damaging, devastating virus. So we have a similar type of devastating but a silent killer called fatty liver disease. What is fatty liver disease? How does it damage your body? Or is it being fat? Is it good, bad, or ugly? I'll just take you through the journey of fat in the body as per the historical perspective. I hope my slides are visible to all of you. Being fat, is it good, ugly, or bad? That is the title of my talk. In fact, in the ancient times, being fat was supposed to be a luxury. In fact, it was a privilege when you were supposed to be fat. But was it really good? Let's try to analyze. The reason we were fat in the olden times was, in the ancient times, there was shortage of the food. So this led to the hunting to catch hold of the food and to store the food what was available. That means once in a while, you'll be able to catch hold of the prey. And once you catch hold of the prey for a long time, you may not be able to get more prey. And hence, whatever was available had to be stored as fat. So the organisms which were able to store their energy in the form of fat for a very long time were able to survive, whereas the other species, they vanished with passage of time. So this led to the natural selection of excessive fat or genotype as a model for survival. That means those individuals, those species, and those live animals or human beings who could store fat, they existed, rest all vanished because the food was scarcely available. But see what has happened. So it gave you a genetic advantage. That means all those who could store fat certainly had a genetic advantage over others. But if you look at what happened, and this is a classical example of the Paima Indian tribe, which lives on the Gala, that is a river Indian reservation in Sacaton, Arizona. So this is a Paima Indians who still carry the same gene. And you'll be surprised, in this area called Arizona in the US, 30 to 50% of the population has diabetes because of the obesity. So this is the genetic makeup which has come from the primitive human beings, which have tried to genetically modify their makeup so as to start storing the food. So this was called thrifty gene hypothesis. That means the heavier you are, more you are able to store the fat, and hence these thrifty genes coupled with the fact that there was green evolution and there was a green revolution in which more agriculture revolution produced more and more fat. So you had individuals who became fat because they had to store the food. And then there was a refined carbohydrates which are available in US because of the economic progress. So a combination of the bad genes coupled with increasing good amount of the food led to onset of this tribe called Paima Indians, in which every other Paima Indian has a history of obesity. Even if you look at the past matriarchal icons of fertility or the so-called mother goddess, this is a sculpture which is available in Australia, which was discovered in Australia. And this Venus of this is called Venus of Willendorf, as long as 25,000 BC. And look at the fat lady. This was a sign of prosperity because the mother goddess was quite fat at that time. What has happened over a period of time? There were cultural connotations. You see, earlier the full and rounded women of painter Rubens, which gave rise to this attractive Rubensy for plumpness in a pleasing and attractive way. That means more plumpish you were, the more attractive you were. And this sense prevailed gradually till the later half of the century, in the 19th century, when slim cupids of the Borough certainly landed up as a thin individuals. Moreover, there were favorable cultural connotation which reflected through the American president in the first and second half of the 20th century. Let's see how they look like. In fact, the stout, corpulent figures of the past president in the first half of the 20th century, you will record Grover Cleveland in 1885, William Taft in 1909, and then Herbert Hoover in 1929. But look at what has happened in sharp contrast to the first half of the 20th century. You had John F. Kennedy, which was lean and thin, well maintained, Ronald Reagan, which was equally good and handsome and slim and trim, and then the George Bush in 1989 to 1993. So these people were not as fat as were the presidents of the United States in the past. And look at what has happened on the 46th president. I'm sure recently you would have seen the very well fought off election in the US, and the weight certainly was against Trump, and the winner was Joe Biden, again stressing the fact that being fat today is not as good as it was thought to be in the olden times. So this is why people earlier became fat was because there was a trinity of three things. You had scarcity of the food throughout the human history. So human beings had to hunt their food. At that time, anybody who was fat could store food, and being fat was good flush and was desirable. In fact, it was also reflected in the arts, in the literature, and the politics, which I have shown you in the form of sculpture and the previous pictures of the presidents of America. So indeed, being fat was good in the olden times. Let's move on to when did it become ugly? Suddenly, from being good in the olden time, how do you suddenly have fat which becomes ugly? Only in the latter half of the 20th century, being fat became stigmatized. So you move from being good to ugly to bad. Before becoming bad, the fat became good. How did it become ugly? Ugly side of the fat is that it was first reflected in the characterization of the Joe by Charles Dickens' fictional novel as a wonderfully fat boy. Marty, the hero of the 1953 play by the same name, who attributes his rejection by the girls to being an ugly man. So an ugly fat man was rejected by the girlfriends. So this is the passion which prevailed. So the passion of slimming reached a frenzy by the middle of the 20th century when a supermodel called Twiggy, they burst into the fashion scene and became a teenage icon. That was only in 1967. And look at what happened. Back in time, when the big breasts were more important than the thighs, the ideal woman was an hourglass with a wavy hair, a pretty name, and a nurturing soul. A woman as sexy as Marilyn and as demure as Jacqueline was the women of the day in 1967. Then came Twiggy, the anti-women. Look at her. No breasts, she just wore white lipsticks, her nails were bitten, her shoulders were bony, and hair was cut like a boy. Would that be accepted way back in 1967 as a beautiful woman? But see what has happened. But then there was this groundbreaking supermodel called Twiggy. She landed on the New York airport way back in 1967. And at JFK in March 67, in the spring of the summer of the love, she had more than 1 lakh people who came to receive her at the airport. And the fashion changed forever since 1967. The Summer of the Love was a social phenomena that occurred during mid-1967 when as many as 100,000 people, mostly young people, sporting hippie fashions of dress and behavior, landed up to receive this girl called Twiggy in JFK airport at USA. So Twiggy became an instant icon, a symbol for a new kind of women with a new kind of streamlined androgynous sex appeal. Then came the time to realize and accept the bad side of the fat. That means from ugly to bad. So far as we know that earlier the fat was bad, then it became ugly. But how did it realize suddenly that the ugly bad can also be bad for the human body, which we realize today? And look at the consequences of the history in the past. This was a William Cullen who noted as early as in 1710 that if you are fatigued, if you have gout, if you have breathing difficulty, you are more likely to be obese. So that means anybody who is fat has difficulty in breathing, or if you have hyperuricemia, you are more likely to have a complication related to this. Then in 1929, this concept in 1920s, this concept came in from the US life insurance companies that people who were not of their ideal body weight and height, that means people who were obese, they were more likely to have problems related to the usage of their insurance policies. That means if you were obese and you were diabetic, you are more likely to consume the resources from your insurance. So that led to the overeating was attributed to the depression, hypochondrial melancholy. In 1967, in 1960s, body fat as an organ became with its own hormones, receptor, and genetics. And we started realizing that fat is not only the deposition of the chubby body, but it also is an organ in itself. It has hormones, it has receptors, and it has a genetic value. In addition, we should understand the relevance of nutrition in causing the obesity, which is the scourge of the present day today. And then this was a mathematician called, his name was, he was from Belgium, and this was a mathematician who called Adolf Quetelet, who came with this concept of BMI, or body mass index. He calculated this index only to find out people who were more likely to be obese and more likely to have a complication related to the disease. And I'm sure most of you today look at the BMI to know whether you are having a healthy or unhealthy body. So obesity in nutshell, if you look at the notorious vicious cycle, it causes metabolic syndrome. That means it will give you diabetes, hypertension, coronary artery disease, stroke, and cancers, or it can simply be presenting as a fatty liver disease. To summarize, we have body fat, which was considered to be good, was called the survival of the fittest at some time. But genetic advantage with passage of time led to the development and the onset of the human beings, which gave an advantage to the people who were surviving with fat alone. With passage of time, we knew that it was a sign of prosperity in the olden times. At the moment, we realized that this is not a sign of prosperity. There was also evidence in the past that the cultural connotation gave you an answer that if you were having a lot of fat in the body, you are more likely to have problem related to the deposition of the fat in the body. So when obesity became ugly, being fat became stigmatized. It was a reason for rejections. People started having passion for slimming, which reached new heights because the Twiggy became the game changer with passage of time, as I've already shown you. Eventually, what actually deserved being bad ultimately turned out to be bad. So we have moved on from being good to ugly, and let's see how we move on to become bad. See, earlier we knew that anybody who has a fatigue, gut, and breathing difficulties, that means these were the people who, even in 1700 AD, William Cullen told us that these people are more likely to be obese. They were the biggest drain for the health insurance companies. And finally, in 1960s, we had nutrition as a science. The being fat and deposition of the fat became a science. And finally, it has taken a vicious circle. Now we realize obesity is known to cause all metabolic complications like fatty liver disease, dyslipidemia, hypertension, heart disease, diabetes mellitus, coronary artery disease, and whatnot. So easy availability of food led to the unmasking of obesity. That means you had an agriculture revolution, which gave you a lot of food. Even now, India produces far more surplus food than what we can eat. You have supermarkets which came into being in the US, and then in late 90s and early early part of this century. You have e-marketing strategies of Zomato and Swiggy. All that has led to a combination of easy availability of food and preservation of the energy conserving genes. That means our genes still have the conservative type of maintaining good fat, whereas we have started eating more. All this has resulted in something called obesity or being overweight. So how we have moved from 20,000, 25,000 BC until 17th century, we knew that being fat was good. Then, as I said, till 1967, when Twiggy landed up in US and started the fashion parade, we knew that being fat was ugly. Till about last 70 years, we have started realizing, no, it is not only ugly, being fat is bad because of the different reasons. The face of the obesity, ladies and gentlemen, has changed over time from being good to ugly to bad. So WHO, based on these assessment and the availability of these different parameters, has proclaimed obesity as a global epidemic in 2005. What does this mean? This means that since timeline of obesity is changing from being good to ugly to bad over a period of time, you look at the number of the people who are having more and more bad disease. Number of the obese people have gone tremendously over the last 7 years. And today you'll be surprised to know that in US, 50% of the children are overweight. In Delhi, there is a study from private public schools in Delhi, which has shown that 40% of the population has 40% of the population is overweight. So with that much of the information on fatty liver disease, I am going to read out some questions which are important for discussion with fatty liver disease and its consequences. So we'll go one by one and try to answer some of the questions which have been relevant and which have been important for me to ask, because these have been the questions which have been asked by the audience. So the first question which is important to know is, how does the fat get deposited and when do we need to have a fat which is bad for the body? The first and foremost thing is that you should be able to maintain your body weight to a right extent. That means if you're able to maintain your body weight to the expected limit, the simplest example is that you need to have a weight and your height measurement done almost on weekly basis. Ideally, if you know your height in centimeter and weight in kg, the simple formula is, if you're able to subtract 100 as a male, if you're a male, I'll give you an example. Suppose your height is around 170 centimeter and your weight is 75 kg. So 170 you subtract your weight in kg from height in centimeter. So that means if you are having a height of say 175 centimeter, so you subtract 100, your weight should be around 75 kg. So any weight at a height of 175 centimeter in a male of any weight of more than 70 kg, 75 kg means you are overweight. Then obesity is further characterized as type 1, type 2 or type 3 obesity, depending upon how overweight you are. If your overweight is say between 25 to 30, then you are overweight. Between 30 to 35, you have a mild obesity. Between 35 to 40, you have a moderate obesity. And above 40, you have severe obesity. Severe obesity means you will have all complications which are related to the different types of complications which I have shown you. That means if you are obese, you are more likely to have diabetes, you are more likely to have fatty liver disease, you are more likely to have heart disease, coronary. Yeah, I am sorry for the technical glitch. What I was trying to answer was, how is it that the fat gets accumulated in the body and what is the mechanism by which fat damages the body? After all, fat is the best substance to store energy because 1 gram of the fat gives you 9 calories vis-a-vis only 4 calories with protein or carbohydrate. So if you want to have storage of the energy, the fat is the best way to store the energy. But problem is, once you have enough of reserves of the fat in the fatty tissue, the fat tends to get accumulated at ectopic tissue. Normally, fat is used for cushioning of your body for taking care of the structural component of your vital organs like intestines, like heart, like lungs, like liver. But whenever you have a lot of fat which is not being stored in the fatty tissue, that is in the subcutaneous tissue or in the peritoneal cavity or in the pericardial region, then it tends to slip away and tend to get deposited in the ectopic tissue, of which most important is the liver. Liver is the major organ which tends to store fat, and it contributes to a lot of metabolic function, including synthesis of the protein, synthesis of the hormones, metabolism of almost all nutrients, the detoxification of the drugs, and production of so many clotting factors which are important. So once you have enough of fat in the liver, at some stage this fat starts occupying the space in the liver. It does not let the liver function. And then whenever there is a second hit to the liver, say because of alcohol or because of the drugs or because of noxious agent like viruses, so the already present fat, which is called the first hit in the liver, is looking for a second hit. That second hit may be drugs or indigenous drugs, chemicals, alcohol can be a second hit. So in a fatty liver, which is already working in a borderline manner, it is looking forward to have a second hit, and that second hit causes damage to the liver. Once the liver gets damaged, it leads to a cascade of the events, and that cascade of events include development of diabetes, hypertension, and formation of abnormal type of lipoproteins or lipid in the blood, which go and get deposited in the small arteries of the heart, leading to development of heart disease, coronary artery disease, angina, and even the death. Similarly, these small particles of the cholesterol and abnormal lipid metabolism, they got all deposited in the veins which supply the brain, leading to the development of the stroke. So this is all dreaded complication which tend to occur if you have too much of the fat. In fact, it is important to maintain your body weight so that whatever fat you need to store, it should be stored only in the subcutaneous tissue. That is a good balance between your diet and exercise and maintaining your body weight. Anything which is above your body needs certainly will spill over into the liver. And once it's stored in the liver, at some point of time, it is looking for a second hit, which is going to damage it. Second question, which has been repeatedly asked, is how does obesity result in a state of chronic low level inflammation? Now, this is an important question. You see, once you have a fat in the liver, it is a innocent bystander to begin with. But at some point of time, because you have so much of the fat in the liver, the normal functioning of the liver is hampered. So if you have fat which spills over from the hepatocytes outside, or because of the development of the insulin resistance, so when insulin resistance is developing because of the deposition of the fat in the liver, and the fat, when the fat cannot be deposited into the subcutaneous tissue, the excessive fat in the subcutaneous tissue releases a number of pro-inflammatory cytokines like TNF alpha. These TNF alpha and other pro-inflammatory cytokines, they tend to go towards the liver and produce a state of chronic low inflammation. And this chronic low inflammatory state, because of the presence of the fat, excessive fat in the mesenteric tissue, in the subcutaneous tissue, or in the liver, leads to persistent slow chronic level of inflammation, which can get triggered and get exaggerated when it is looking forward to a second hit. Third question, which had been repeatedly asked, I think it is very relevant, is what is malnutrition in a frequent complication of ALD? What role does this play in aggravating alcoholic liver disease? Now, malnutrition is a problem which occurs in alcoholics. You see, these patients who drink heavy amount of alcohol, they do not eat well because of the nausea, because of the vomiting, because of their addiction, and because of the poor lifestyle changes. Moreover, alcohol, by causing liver disease, inflammation in the gut, as well as alteration in the gut microbiota, that decreases the appetite. So what the alcoholic is doing is just taking the empty calories. These empty calories, in absence of a nutritious, well-balanced diet, leads to development of the malnutrition, which is an important component of alcoholic liver disease. Next question which is being asked is, what are the risks and benefits which are associated with use of the drugs such as orlistat to reduce weight? Orlistat is a drug which basically decreases the absorption of the fat from the intestines into the body. That means it is a substance which prevents the absorption of the fat from the intestine. So it is a good drug, but my suggestion to you will be, in case you want to take fat and then not let it get absorbed from the intestine by taking another drug, I think you should be more committed to not taking fats, because this will help only in reduction of the absorption of the fat, not of the carbohydrates. So it is extremely important that if you're committed, then please stick to your daily routine of exercise and diet in an attempt to maintain your BMI. As I have already mentioned, if you are a female, then subtract 105 centimeter from your height in centimeter, you will have your weight in kg. Suppose your height as a female is 165 centimeter. If you subtract 105 from that, 105 from 165, your weight should be 60 kg. So any weight more than 60 kg, make all attempt, eat less, exercise more, so that you do not try to increase your weight. You can restrict the fat, that will be better because it has its own side effects. Next question is hypothyroidism and hyperthyroidism can present as a complication of the fatty liver disease. Can this serve as a marker for severity of the disease? Usually they are typically not a part and parcel of the liver disease. Hypothyroidism and hyperthyroidism can occur as subclinical entities, but per se they do not cause liver disease, or they do not occur as a result of the liver disease. But in case you have liver disease, both hyperparathyroidism and hypoparathyroidism do contribute to the problem. That is the problem. In case you have just a liver disease, so do not think your thyroid parameters will be altered grossly to make the change. Next question is, how does hypothyroidism result in NASH? Now, hypothyroidism per se decreases the metabolic capacity of the body, of the fatty tissues to metabolize the fat. So it basically causes slowness of all the system. So in presence of a metabolic derangement like hypothyroidism, you have an overall decreased metabolism of the fatty acids to be stored in the fatty tissues. So you have more free circulating fatty acids in the blood, and more free circulating fatty acids, they tend to get deposited in the liver, cause fatty liver disease. What are the complications of the low subcutaneous fat? This is a relevant question which has been asked. Subcutaneous fat means some storage of the fat. In fact, it is not as bad if you are able to maintain your body weight. It is advantageous to have subcutaneous fat to a limit. In fact, this works as a cushioning agent. This works as an agent to produce vitamin D, to produce a number of the hormones, as well as to maintain the integrity of your internal organ. Problem is the visceral fat, and problem is the overall increase in the size of the fat. If you're overweight, then any fat is bad. Between the visceral and the subcutaneous fat, certainly visceral fat is worse of the two. Next question is there any, I like to answer it, as there is no available approved therapy of NAFLD, treating the resultant insulin resistance is a way to achieve symptom. How effective is this approach in treating the disease? In fact, this is a relevant question, very important question. Now, insulin resistance is the hallmark for development of fatty liver disease. In fact, it is like a chicken and egg theory, which is still debated and which is still disputed as to which comes is first. Is it that the fatty liver comes ahead of insulin resistance, or presence of insulin resistance leads to development of fatty liver? In fact, it is a two-way theory. People still are not sure which one of the two is correct, but fact remains both of them tend to occur together. Most of us believe that the primary problem lies in insulin resistance, which leads to development of fatty liver disease and all the consequences thereof which occur because of the fatty liver disease. But problem in treating insulin resistance, it is very difficult to treat. First of all, there is a problem at the level of the insulin receptors onto the cellular surface, and then there is a post receptor translation of the effect of the insulin onto the nuclear receptor and their downstream signaling. So this is something which cannot be easily handled. So the only way today to improve insulin sensitivity is you First of all, there are some drugs which can be of use, but they have limited efficacy. But weight reduction as well as exercise are the only natural way of decreasing the insulin resistance and trying to increase the insulin sensitivity. There are some insulin sensitizing agents, they have their own side effects, but given the choice, natural will be more. But I would agree with anybody who will ask me, if you're able to tackle insulin resistance right at the time of inception, then you'll be able to prevent fatty liver disease, but it's not easy to handle. Obeticholic acid has been shown to be effective in modulating disease in patients with NASH. However, why hasn't been approved yet? You see, the pivotal trials which have been done in patients with the non-alcoholic fatty liver disease have been published as part of the phase 3 trials from the US. Why it has not been approved as yet is because it still leads to a marginal benefit only, and it has substantial side effects. The major side effects are onset of the pruritus and increase in the LDL, which is a bad cholesterol, and decrease in the HDL, which is a good cholesterol. So if you're decreasing your good cholesterol, if you're increasing your bad cholesterol and it's causing itching, this is the biggest limitation of obeticholic acid. And I'm sure with newer modification and alteration in the structure, stereochemical structure of the obeticholic acid, we may soon have a molecule which will be a good modality to treat fatty liver disease. Next question, which is relevant, is can simple fatty liver develop into NASH if untreated? Yes. After all, there are 3 stages of development of the fatty liver disease. You have a simple bland fatty liver that switches on to development of inflammation, which is triggered by presence of the fat, which is called non-alcoholic steatohepatitis or NASH. And you'll be surprised to know it is such an important entity that the whole of the world today is celebrating the NASH Day. So an untreated NASH certainly can progress to development of the cirrhosis. And once you have cirrhosis, you have all the attendant complications like GI bleeding, jaundice, ascites, blood vomiting, and development of the hepatocellular carcinoma. What is the success rate of liver transplantation in NASH patients? NASH patients, if we are able to handle them right at the time of inception, if we are able to nip the problem in the bud, we may be able to doing a human's job in controlling the disease. If you are able to maintain your height and you maintain your body weight by restricting your diet and exercising, you'll be able to ward off a number of complications. Mind you, in NASH, not many people will die of liver disease. In NASH, before the onset of the end-stage liver disease, more people will die of attendant cardiovascular and cerebrovascular accident and not the liver disease. Liver disease will occur only once you have cirrhosis of the liver. So it is important that if you have a fatty liver disease, to prevent all complication, try to reduce your weight, maintain a good healthy lifestyle, decrease the carbohydrate component of the diet so that you do not land up in NASH, which will certainly lead to development of newer complication. The next question which has been asked is, how is it that we at the moment do not have NASH, the medical therapy of the NASH? Answer to that is that as of now, in patients who have NASH, it is a multifactorial etiology. We do not know whether it is related to the genes or because of the behavioral therapy or because of the lack of exercise or because of the overeating or because of the metabolic complications like diabetes. So unless you can pinpoint the reason, it's not easy to get onto the root cause of the problem. And hence, as of now, not much is available in terms of pharmacotherapy for NASH. And the success rate for transplantation is extremely important because success rate of NASH related liver transplantation is as good as those with liver disease, except that 20 to 30% of the patient may have recurrence of the NASH because the genetic abnormalities do not get corrected with the liver transplantation alone. Next question is, since malnutrition is a long-term complication of bariatric surgery, can this lead to aggravation of the NASH? It's a very relevant question. In fact, if you do bariatric surgery, already a substantial number of the patients have underlying NASH. In fact, it has been shown that if you reduce fat or if you reduce body weight, a majority of these patients do improve. However, some subset of the patient who already have very severe fatty liver disease or cirrhosis at the time of bariatric surgery, these are the people who can undergo complications. So it is important for us as hepatologists to assess before the surgery of the bariatric surgery that the patient may be able to tolerate, because we have seen a number of the patients who have liver related complication primarily during the development of during the need for bariatric surgery and development of the complications related to that. Currently, liver biopsy is the best approach to appropriately diagnose NASH. Are there any non-invasive tests? Yes, we have this new test called FibroScan, which tells you how stiff the liver is. Even without touching the liver, even without doing a liver biopsy, we can diagnose NASH, and we can diagnose advanced cirrhosis. In fact, NASH is a histological diagnosis. What you want to do by FibroScan and non-invasive test is that whether the patient has an advanced liver disease or not. NASH can be diagnosed by a number of preclinical parameters and biochemical parameters and epidemiological parameters, and hence need for liver biopsy is coming slowly with passage of time. Why do NAFLD and NASH present the same histological finding despite the marked difference in their prognosis? I think somebody wanted to know between alcoholic steatohepatitis and non-alcoholic steatohepatitis, the difference is the same in terms of histopathology. But there are some differences which can be easily made. The only way to distinguish between the two is to have an excellent history. If history tells you the patient has not been drinking, then you know this is a non-alcoholic steatohepatitis. Realizing very well, a lot of people who drink, they tend to underreport their alcohol intake. How is the mechanism of progression of NASH different from NAFLD? Difference between NAFLD to NASH and NAFLD from NASH to cirrhosis is that in NAFLD first triggers inflammation causing NASH, and once you have a NASH, you have more triggering of the fibrosis, which causes cirrhosis of the liver. So there is an initial component of inflammation when it switches from NAFLD to NASH, and once there is enough of NASH, more and more fibrosis will result in development of cirrhosis of the liver. Are there any biomarkers for liver fibrosis that can effectively diagnose NASH? Yes, there is a marker called ELF marker studies and other hyaluronidase markers which can be easily done in the blood, but none of this are proven to be more useful than FibroScan alone or a simple APRI, that is a combination of AST and platelet ratio index. If you just can do a simple liver function test, look at your platelet ratio, AST, ALT, and platelet ratio, that is enough to tell you whether you have a NASH or not. You don't need to go in for this fancy biochemical test to look for the fibrotic markers in the blood. There was a decrease in the number of liver transplantation worldwide due to the COVID-19. How this has impacted patients with cirrhosis requiring liver transplantation? In fact, we have had high mortality in patients who were decompensated, were not fit for liver transplantation. That has occurred not only in patients who have liver disease, but in other conditions also, like those with diabetes, those with malignancies. And these patients certainly have been neglected because our focus had been primarily on the COVID. So with COVID almost weaning off the second wave, and let's hope and pray it does not come back again, I think we'll be again focusing more on our day-to-day routine practice of hepatology. There has been a decrease, and the last question I'd like to answer is, does glycogen storage disease predispose patient to NASH? Any patient who has an underlying liver disease, if you have a superimposed injury, certainly it will give you a concomitant injury over and above the underlying baseline injury. So with that, I think what I have tried to impress upon today to you is there has been a drastic change in our perception of fat in the body and as well as in the liver. Fat, which was supposed to be part of your prosperity and well-being way back in 17th and 18th century, in 1967, thanks to this concept of slimming by this girl called Twiggy from France, we realized that it was being fat was ugly. And subsequently, good nutritional science has told us it's not that it's ugly, but it is harmful and detrimental for the body, because this is just the beginning of a chain of events which can culminate into almost all complications in the body, like diabetes, hypertension, coronary artery disease, stroke, malignancies, polycystic ovarian disease. So if we can go back with one simple lesson, that you go and maintain your body weight to the best of your ability, I think we'll be able to save the misery of most of you by by attenuating a large number of the complications, the disease processes which ensue thereof because of the development of the fatty liver disease. With that, I am going to say goodbye to all of you with some simple lesson that please go and maintain your weight, eat less, exercise more, be healthy, be safe. Thank you and goodbye.
Insights from the world's best medical minds. You are watching therightdoctors.com.